Michael Lewis, your famous finance author, can you explain how the FTX Ponzi scheme happened?
This isn't a Ponzi scheme. Like when you think of a Ponzi scheme, I don't know, Bernie Madoff. The problem is there's no real business there. The dollar coming in is being used to pay the dollar going out. And in this case, they actually had a great real business. If no one had ever cast aspersions on the business, if there hadn't been a run on customer deposits, they'd still be sitting there making tons of money.
What the f*** are you talking about? Ladies and gentlemen, today is the first day of Sam Bankman-Fried's criminal trial, and already we have books, media tours going on about it, most notably from the finance writer Michael Lewis, who wrote The Big Short, Moneyball, and now Going Infinite, which he says is a letter to the jury about the true story of what happened with FTX.
You had so much access to Sam Bankman-Fried writing this book. What ultimately is the purpose here?
I realized I had an ambition for the book. I saw it as a kind of letter to the jury. I mean, there's going to be this trial, and the lawyers are going to tell two stories. And so there's a story war going on in the courtroom, and I think neither one of those stories is as good as the story I have.
Now, I decided to read that story so you don't have to, because historically, these letters to the jury haven't gone all that great, and turns out this one is no different. I had to sit through hundreds of pages of Sam worship, a sycophantic 60 Minutes interview talking about what a great business FTX was, and I was only left with one question. What is it about Sam Bankman-Fried that makes smart people go nuts? Well, I decided to investigate. I wondered, is it the Bahamas sea salt air? Is it effective altruism? Or is it a $40 million penthouse? I think I've got a guess. Which is why I'm here, in the $40 million Bahama penthouse. Now, I know many of you have questions. How did you afford this? The truth is, I lowballed him with FTT tokens, and the seller was very motivated. So this will be my new base of operations for finding the truth about SBF. And we're going to start by looking at one of the last supporters of Sam, Michael Lewis. And yes, the coconut came with the penthouse. To understand this interview, frankly, the whole book, you need to know that Michael Lewis started it as like a positive story about Sam before FTX collapsed, right? It was supposed to be a crypto, like rags to riches story about how dreams really do come true. But of course, then they committed fraud and collapsed. And so everyone kind of naturally thought, oh yeah, he'll just change the book. Actually, kind of an interesting twist. Except the book didn't change. 75% of the book just doesn't mention anything about fraud. When Michael Lewis does get to the collapse, he just believes Sam Bankman-Fried about everything unquestioningly. Like it's so bad that Sam Bankman-Fried wouldn't even trust himself that much. Literally, Sam is quoted in Michael's book saying, and I do think this is a red flag, quote, "In a lot of ways, I don't really have a soul. In the end, there's a pretty decent argument that my empathy is fake, my feelings are fake, and my facial reactions are fake." Now compare and contrast that to Michael Lewis, describing Sam as, "The things he was telling me, all of which, I should say here, turned out to be true, was incredible." So even SBF believes in SBF less than Michael Lewis does. This man is a one-man cheerleader team. You've literally got the subject of your book saying, "I have no soul and my reactions are fake." And then the writer just goes, "This may be the most honest man I've ever met." Believing this requires so much willful ignorance on the part of Michael Lewis that it borderlines on malpractice. Take, for instance, Dan Friedberg, SBF's lawyer, who we explained has a history of covering up fraud before FTX. Does Michael Lewis mention this at all? No. Let me share with you some of the ways Dan Friedberg is talked about. Here's some quotes. In Sam's world, Dan Friedberg, in his early 50s, has been the only important grown-up. He was FTX's general counsel. He was also the babysitter. He'd sort of gotten swept up by the enthusiasm of the effective altruists. "I wanted to be a Sam," as he put it. And by the way, being a Sam was a huge compliment to Michael.
A lot of people wanted there to be a Sam. You know, there's still a Sam Bankman-Fried shaped hole in the world that now needs filling. Like that character would be very useful.
What he represented.
What he wanted to do with the resources.
The irony here is, again, you know who is more skeptical of Dan Friedberg than Michael Lewis? Sam Bankman-Fried. How do I know this? Well, I got an audio recording from Tiffany Fong, a reporter we've talked to before who's been talking to Sam.
Hey, Coffee. So, while talking to Sam in April, I discovered he was aware of Dan Friedberg's past, although he stopped short of explicitly accusing him of committing crimes.
Well, everyone thought that Dan Friedberg was very clearly sketchy, so it was very shocking that he was hired at FTX.
So, he's an interesting guy.
Because what was he involved with? Ultimate Bets? Or something like that?
Yeah, it's something like that. It wasn't quite Ultimate Bets, but it's something like that.
Yeah. And he was like, yeah, his reputation was like that he was really shady or something like that.
Yeah, he did have a somewhat shady reputation. He's a very good lawyer. He's extremely productive. He had extremely good instincts, and he would take care of problems that like other lawyers would not think to take care of or not know how to take care of.
So even Sam Bankman-Fried doesn't try to deny Dan's shady reputation and said Dan would take care of things other lawyers wouldn't? Like, even the guy on trial is like, all right, I have to admit, he's pretty sketchy. So it's insane to watch Michael Lewis put zero skepticism into the characters of FTX's collapse. But then, watch this. Contrast that with how much skepticism Michael Lewis brings to the bankruptcy lawyer, John Ray, like the guy who's taken over the collapse now that FTX is bankrupt. Quote, John Ray expected to see evidence of a crime. Instead of answering the question, Ray launched a blitzkrieg of lawsuits against various people to whom Sam had handed money. The pleasure Ray took in whatever he unearthed was so infectious that I often didn't have the heart to say, I'm not quite sure that you found exactly what you think you found. So every step of the way, he's just like, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But Sam Bankman-Fried, it's so unbelievably condescending the way this book interrogates everyone who had to clean up the FTX mess instead of the, people responsible. But worse, Michael Lewis casts himself as like the only truth teller. We've all been in the dark, but thanks to this man's mighty powers of the pen, he's gonna reveal the truth that nobody knew.
The story of Sam's life is people not understanding him, misreading him. He's so different, he's so unusual. I mean, I think in a funny way that the reason I have such a compelling story is I have a character that I do come to know and that the reader comes to know that the world still doesn't know.
Hey guys, you're being really mean to Sam. Don't you know he's really misunderstood? Did I mention what a good guy he is yet? He really cares about pandemics and saving democracy.
So Sam Bankman-Fried ends up with a portfolio heavily concentrated in two things. Pandemic prevention, because there really are things the government should be doing. He took the view that all the big existential problems are going to require the United States government to be involved to solve them. And if the democracy is undermined, like we don't have our democracy anymore, all these problems are less likely to be solved.
I have no idea why we're talking about Sam like he's on trial for the Nobel Peace Prize instead of fraud. The part that annoys me the most is Michael Lewis doesn't admit the fact that for all the talk about giving, the effective altruism really didn't happen. You know what did happen? Paying celebrities stupid sums of money so he could hang out with them.
He paid Tom Brady $55 million for 20 hours a year for 3 years. He paid Steph Curry $35 million for same thing for 3 years.
Pretty good hourly wage.
He spent $100 and something million buying the naming rights for the Miami Heat Arena.
I don't think so.
He spent $25 million making a Super Bowl ad with Larry David.
It's FTX? Yeah, I don't think so.
For which he then paid Larry David another $10 million. It's breathtaking what's on that list.
I don't know what's so breathtaking about that. How does this qualify as like, this guy's such an altruist? You paid a guy $50 million for 20 hours of work. And let's not forget, by the way, part of that money came from customers' deposits. So just understand, as we go into this court case, you're gonna hear some people try to say that Sam is an innocent, well-meaning altruist who bumbled his way into losing $8 billion. Of course, we all know that isn't true. And the people who are suggesting it, it seems are allergic to basic research and do not extend the same levels of sympathy that they extend to Sam to the actual victims, who they think are just gamblers anyways.
I could see people watching this saying like, come on guys, this is Elizabeth Holmes in cargo shorts.
Right.
And this is all a ruse. Don't fall for the shtick. This is a bad actor.
It is a little different, supplying phony medical information to people that might kill them. And in this case, what you're doing is possibly losing some money that belonged to crypto speculators in the Bahamas. On the other hand, This is not to excuse. He shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, you kind of are excusing it. It was just a few speculators in the Bahamas who lost money. No, it wasn't. Regular people are owed money. That's kind of the whole point of this thing, partially because of all of those influencers who were hired, whether it be on YouTube, sports influencers. They weren't just appealing to the Bahamas. Those Super Bowl ads didn't play in the Bahamas, played in the United States, baby. This whole interview got me, as you can tell, a little bit steamed, which then made me read the book because I was like, probably the book's better. But that actually made me more angry. And it literally put me back to work on this case. I'd been working on a different project thinking, the SBF stuff's kind of open shut. The normal finance writers can handle it. But I was wrong. So I'm back. I'll be watching this case like a hawk. And, we'll be covering it for the $40 million Bahama penthouse. But I may even fly up to New York just to make sure there's no funny business. Make sure Michael Lewis isn't in the courtroom petitioning the jury for a lighter sentence on his baby Sam. Anyways, that's it for me. Case closed, 1 star. I got bribed to make this video twice, actually, to expose a casino's business rivals. Here's a screenshot calling it a bounty and a sponsorship in exchange for a video. Now, I didn't take the money. In fact, I'm quite angry about it. Not just because these people thought I was for sale, but because they offered me a dollar amount that was way too low. Now, everyone has seen those headlines of casinos paying millions a year for influencers to sell their soul. So when they approached me, I was expecting a lot. Instead, they offered $20,000 to the guy in the $10 million studio. Ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't even cover the electricity bill. Now, to be clear, we would never take a bribe of any size. This show is funded by $5 a month on Patreon. That's where the real money is. But either way, I had a dilemma. Clearly, these people thought I could be bought. If I ignored their bribe, new viewers might be confused. I needed to send a message, and I needed to send it fast. So I decided on this. Rather than expose just their competitors in the gambling scene, what if we exposed everyone? Starting first with the people who offered me money. Welcome to the Counter-Strike Gambling Investigation, a multi-part series where we're going to be talking about a video game that has created an underage gambling epidemic that makes hundreds of millions, even billions a year. Now, some people thought it stopped in 2016, but they couldn't be more wrong. The world of Counter-Strike gambling is still massive, and nobody wants to talk about it because most of them are making too much money. Those who do speak out have faced consequences, so we've got to be careful. Either way, let's get started.
I've gotta say, Coffee, I'm really proud you're taking on the bad guys. He's defusing! I've been playing Counter-Strike for years, and honestly, the bots are really out of control.
The bots? We're doing a gambling thing. Besides, you're a bot.
Not according to them. Woo! Another ace!
I don't have time for this. You begged me to be my sidekick. Are you gonna help or not?
Hey, I can multitask. What do you need?
I need to find the bad guy. I've interviewed like 40 people for this story. They all claim to be the victim. They're all pointing fingers.
Sounds pretty human to me. Maybe all you really need is a more objective view. Go ahead. Lay it on me.
Well, everything comes back to one moment. When protesters raided the tournament.
Wait, protesters? At a tournament?
Yeah, protesters at the PGL Majors in Copenhagen. It was one of the biggest esports tournaments ever for Counter-Strike. 1.8 million watching, over 1 million in the prize pool. It was hosted at Royal Arena. It was a big deal. And everything was going smoothly until suddenly people rushed the stage. The crowd was panicked. No one knew what was going on. Someone broke the trophy on stage. And turns out there were people handcuffing themselves outside. Nobody knew what was going on. They were upset about CSGO Roll, a gambling website that sponsored one of the teams called G2.
Huh. Some kind of overzealous advocate, maybe?
No, not like you'd think. I found out that the protesters had been paid to be there by a rival casino called CSGO Empire.
A casino protesting a casino. How'd you find that one?
Funny you should ask. Let me introduce you to our first character, the owner of CSGO Empire. He calls himself Monarch. He live-streamed himself doing the whole thing.
Oh, an exhibitionist.
You have no idea.
If G2 is gonna be playing on the stage, I was planning if somebody's going to Germany, or if you have any friends in Germany, I can pay you a good amount of money. Just come to my DMs, and I can pay you a good amount of money if you run on the stage in the middle of the game and glue yourself on the stage. Or even better, if you put like handcuffs. If you can handcuff yourself on one of the computers or one of the tables, I will pay you decent money.
They need to go in, even if there's a security guard, even if they're gonna be taken away. If somebody goes home walking, they will be fired.
And I'm so dedicated to this. Like, if I'm in a war, I'm gonna be fighting to the end.
Wow, this guy is just shameless.
Yeah, but it gets much worse. Someone from Monarch's team at this point decides to text me. He offered me a bounty to cover the story. I'd already gotten a similar email offering me 20 grand to expose the scam casino in that group.
Obviously you said
No.
yes. No. Right.
Right. Of course, I said no. I can't take their money, but I did want to speak with Monarch. I texted them back saying I'll take the info, but I also wanted to text CSGO Roll's owner and ask them the same thing. I want their side of the story too.
And?
Well, CSGO Roll's owner is named Killian. He said it's a one-sided harassment campaign. Monarch, on the other hand, says something much different. He admits to attacking CSGO Roll, but basically says he's attacking all the influencers they work for him. They're on this wall of shame that he's going after.
They have made millions and millions of euros from illegal casinos. And what I am going to do is I'm going to be delivering justice to these motherfuckers. Tax investigations are coming. People are gonna be going to jail. YouTube channels, Twitch channels, Kick channels, Twitters, they're gonna be banned. And I will deliver justice to these motherfuckers.
Wall of shame? What is up with this guy?
Like I told you, Monarch sees himself as like a scam buster or something.
He thinks he's you.
No,
He said something else, actually.
I identify myself as some sort of a hero in this story. It's very important to note actually that Killian is not the only target. Like we are having war with other sides as well. And I have a track record. Like before this CSGO drama, I've been doing this thing for many years actually.
That's really his main defense. He does this to everyone.
Maybe it's true. Maybe he's just got a screw loose.
No, the attacks here are more personal. And I found out Killian and Monarch aren't just competitors, they used to be business partners.
I made a company 10 years ago with Killian who stole my company. The second company I made, he bribed people to have my company shut down. The third company, which is my current big company, which I made all my money, bought my castles and he's been trying to do. Killian has been trying to do everything to take me down, get me arrested, get me killed. Killian is a f***ing psychopath, and these motherfuckers are Killian's minions, and I'm going to be taking down every single one of these motherfuckers.
So Killian betrayed Monarch.
Depends on who you believe. The point is, this isn't so much about justice, it's kind of about revenge.
The beautiful thing about revenge is that there is no deadlines. You know, you can do it whenever. You know, life is long and you can do it whenever. By the way, I don't mind the guns and stuff. It's like just fun and games. What is coming for you is something different. There will be people going to prison. There will be severe consequences. There will be interesting stuff coming.
Coffee, I'm starting to worry this is a BetterHelp segue into couples counseling.
No, I wouldn't scam you. Look, I'm just trying to show who this guy is and what he wants.
Look, I'm not trying to ruin your Mindhunter episode, but sometimes it really is as simple as an unhinged internet tough guy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too, but it's how people talked about this guy. When I interviewed them, they would just freeze when I mentioned his name. Honestly, it was bizarre.
The thing that honestly upsets me about the whole Monarch thing, and this is what's been so hard about the story, people will not give their real opinion because everyone says they're scared. You and I were having a nice chat. Can't talk about the Monarchs. Why?
Bro, the weather was like really nice today outside.
Dude, come on! Tell me what's going on!
I can't.
Everybody talks behind the scenes. Everyone talks behind the scenes. Everyone talks. Nobody talks in front of the camera. Why? He intimidates you guys? No, not you guys. He's intimidating someone else and everyone doesn't want that to happen to them. Is that it?
I think it's just... No, I'm not gonna say anything.
That is crazy. It's like a real-life Voldemort.
I know. Most people were scared to even talk, except for one of the names on Monarch's Wall of Shame.
Yeah, I'm Grim. I've been doing Cisco gambling for about a decade, and I have been doing it as a content creator for probably like almost 8 years now.
Can you take us from the beginning of your relationship with Monarch and just tell the story as you see it?
Right, so it's been like almost a year now, so it's a little bit hard to like get the timeline like completely right on top of my head, but it started around May last year is when the I guess included beef initially started. It was mostly just on Twitter. He essentially started like threatening me and told me that I needed to drop Cisco roll or else, right? I then responded by posting a tweet myself with a screenshot of what he said, calling him out for it and telling him to come at me with everything he's got. Which, you know, in retrospect, massive mistake. I've known him for a while, a few years before this. He's never done anything like this that I have seen before. He might have done it like privately without, like you said, you talk to other people that had similar stories, right? But I just haven't spoken about it. And I think maybe that's what has happened before. But that's initially how it went down, yeah. He DM'd me, I made my tweet, and he went after me ever since.
So you say, come after me with everything you got.
Yeah, I think I use the word full thrust because he keeps telling me every time he does something, was this full thrust enough? Like it's like stuck in his head that I use the term full thrust.
Go all in, full thrust. If everybody goes full thrust, that's again when we go full thrust again.
I started getting screenshots from people that are inside one of his Discord. He's got multiple ones that he uses for his quote-unquote cult, the Jofa cult he calls it, where they were talking about spraying some flyers around my city, this and that. A lot of crazy ones that he luckily didn't do, but then nothing really happened for a few months because this was back in May. And in around September, I all of a sudden wake up to a bunch of missed calls from family, friends, everything, right? I get told that they had posted flyers everywhere in my city, and I mean everywhere. High schools, malls, people's cars, in their mailboxes. Monarch himself said they did around 30,000 flyers, and there's about 30,000 people in my city. So they basically spread it everywhere. That had like a picture of Cisco roll, me, my house, my cars, saying that like I'm scamming people in my city. That's essentially how it started with the flyers.
What the Coffee? This is like a personalized harassment campaign.
I know. But what freaked me out is that Monarch doesn't deny any of it. He thinks it's justified.
Yeah, there's this one case, this YouTuber called Grim, who lives in Norway.
Yeah.
We work times about like various things. So he's one of Killian's main advertisers. He's made at least $6 million from blatantly promoting this scam. He's basically, for many years, he's been streaming like every day, playing on CS:GO and making YouTube videos there, just blatantly scamming his audience and making tons of money. And he has this like kind of like has this mansion in Norway where he has like his Lamborghinis parked outside. We gave these flyers to like the full town. The full town got these flyers that has Grim's face on it, and it explains like how he's made his money by scamming people.
He just admits to it.
Oh, he takes credit for a lot more than that.
So what happened just a month ago now, when they sent 18 people to show up at my city, outside my door, having a quote-unquote protest.
Wait, 18 people to your house?
Yeah, there was 18 people.
And this is, to be clear, a competitor casino to the one you're working for.
Yeah.
Is harassing is the only word that comes to mind here. Well, I don't even know if it's... I mean, what was it? What do you think it was? Was it intimidation? What was it?
Oh, it was definitely intimidation as well as harassing. Because, like, obviously when they show up at my house, they make it incredibly difficult for me to be here because they're gonna be right outside my house. Like, again, I live in Norway and our rules are way too nice.
Coffee, I'll admit it. This is a little bit more than an internet tough guy. These are mafia tactics.
It's insane. I mean, Monarch is still trying to say this is all fair game.
Yeah, so we did this funny protest one day. We sent the cute little cult. There was maybe like 15 people outside of his house with the infamous Sticky Hand, who claims to have lost his house to CS Coral scam.
It's Sticky Hand! I'm a Calden because CS Coral's got my house! Grim, I'm coming for you! Killian, I'm coming for you! Give my house back! Give my house back! Give my house back!
They were there, they parked with their like tents like outside of the house, and they had like microphones and they had the pitchforks and stuff. And they were just like marching in the neighborhood. And Sticky Hand did also. He went to knock on his door just to speak with him.
I have to say, this is an insane level of harassment. I mean, I get that you believe he scammed people, and let's say he did scam people. That should be left to law enforcement, not to, like, you know, y'all are basically like video vigilantes, you know, going to his house. I saw Warren also posted something about like he'd pay money for someone to break into his house in Minecraft. That was a joke, or?
Yeah, obvious joke. Yeah, that would be crossing a line. Yeah, I can agree. Somebody could say that this is like it might be pretty insane,
But that's how much
you
believe Killian has scammed people. I think it goes to what you detest this company so much you think basically it's worth the price to for this war.
So we have the numbers, we have the facts, we pretty much know exactly how much he has made from CS Coral. We've had extensive conversations with Grim himself. We know that he understands exactly what he's doing. He's consciously scamming people, and we have consulted lawyers about this, and we are actually planning to take legal action. But the unfortunate thing is that there are ways how they can evade this kind of like legal justice, and probably there's not going to be real like legal consequences for him. And if there are, it's going to be kind of like, you know, years down the line after CS Coral has exit scammed.
That's sort of my problem. This is clearly harassment, but Monarch's not wrong that the people in this industry usually get away with it.
But he's in the same industry.
Well, exactly. And that's what kills his argument. Either way, this whole thing is so heated that both sides now think they're in danger.
Let's talk about security.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's probably is shaking you up, made you rethink how much you need to protect yourself. Have you taken any steps to try to, obviously you said you did go to the police, they did nothing. What else did you do?
Right now I have 24/7 security sitting outside. So that's the precaution I have currently.
That's expensive.
Yeah, no, it is expensive. It is. Like, I'm not paying for it, but yes, it is expensive. I've heard the figures.
Who is paying for it?
CS Coral is paying for it.
So you got your rival casinos, and one is paying for 24/7 security for the influencer because an opponent casino is gonna go to their house and harass them and possibly do more.
Yeah.
So also, like, I'm genuinely scared for my life. I'm genuinely scared for my family, like, because of this whole thing. Like, I am with like huge security guards, and I need to be like super careful. I don't really like. I need to be careful where I move, and I need to be super careful about like my location being doxed. Because I think he has all the reasons to kill me. So.
Do you think he would cross that line? As you said, you would never do that. Do you think he would?
No, knowing him as a person, he's pure evil. Has no morals. It would be literally plus EV to get me killed. So now I'm doing my best to, first of all, not have my location leaked, but also I have like significant security because of that.
That has to be a serious expense. I mean, it's like 24/7 security is expensive, right?
I mean, it's not cheap. Plus, also like have to take a bunch of like precautions for my family as well.
I think I may be dying of what humans call irony. They're both scared?
Yeah, everyone's terrified of revenge. And it explains why people not involved wouldn't want to be involved. Even just recently, I heard another YouTuber has been getting the Monarch treatment. Flyers, house visits, confrontations. Who would want that?
You, apparently. What's to stop Monarch from coming after you?
Nothing. I mean, I would say the harassment is usually limited to influencers in the gambling sector, but recently an esports journalist got threatened as well.
These people are dangerous, and these people are clearly willing to do anything for money. Let's get them out of esports once and for all.
We are looking into it. We might actually do some legal action towards him, like some defamation lawsuit or whatever. I think it would be fun to do just for the lore, just for the memes, and it could be like this could be a fun marketing campaign. And for this reason, the cult is coming for Richard.
I tried to confront Monarch on it. I also tried to confront him on this bounty thing.
I'm going to do this story, and obviously I'm going to try to tell it how I tell all my stories, which is as neutral and like to the facts as possible. But I don't want anyone going after me either. I don't want anyone showing up at my house, to be very transparent with you.
Yeah. I'll be transparent, and I'm not intending to send any sticky hands. So.
Oh, I also have to say, did you know Warren offered me a bounty to do this story?
I did not.
Y'all shouldn't tell journalists that. That's not good. Y'all shouldn't pay people to do stories.
Noted.
Yeah, because it just makes it hard to, because I can't obviously can't accept that. That would completely compromise everything I stand for. To be like, it'd be biased. It'd bias me towards your side if I was to accept that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I just wanted to address it.
And I respect your approach. See that you're a great journalist.
Oh, how reassuring that someone you're making a video on likes you before the story.
Yeah, I guess we'll see if he keeps his promise on that, but I also wanted to confront the guy who offered me $20,000 to do the story too.
Let me guess. He dodged the question?
Sort of. He said that he didn't know that I was a journalist and that I wasn't someone to offer money to. He also claimed that this industry has cooked him and that everything is money-oriented.
I mean, that part might be true.
Oh, for sure. I mean, for all the talk about justice and scams, it's about money too. Just recently, Grim says he got this message. Monarch would stop the house harassment if he dropped CSGO Roll and took a match deal at CSGO Empire.
So that's that then. You've had the villain the whole time.
Not quite. I mean, we had to address the bribe. We have to address the harassment. But our story is not about gambling influencers being the victims, who are also millionaires, by the way. Remember, we're investigating everyone, and Monarch's just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the problem. I want to know who's really behind this thing, who's really the victims, and who's really the villain.
I started gambling on Counter-Strike when I was probably 13 years old.
13 years old.
14 years old.
I think I was 14.
I saw it online. I saw a bunch of these YouTubers playing it.
Yes!
They see their favorite influencer playing on some third-party case opening site, and they just go deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole, and soon they are addicted.
Maybe the solution isn't with the casinos at all. Maybe it's a good time to talk about the influencers who promote it instead. Today we're talking about a bank that won't let you withdraw your money. A bank where almost $100 million has vanished. Or has it? Because I've traced some of the missing funds, and I think some people are hiding the truth. Even worse, our regulators and safeguards may have failed us. Let me show you what I mean. Today we're talking to a bunch of people who found their money frozen in their bank last year. 6 months later, they started getting paid out, but some of the money is missing. Welcome to the Discord Diner. All right, let's start with the basics. What is your name and how much money did you have on your savings app?
Well, my name is Colin. My savings was $53,105.95.
How much are you getting back?
Not a single penny.
Hey, my name's Dave. I lost more than $70,000. The balance I received back from Evolve was $0.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Schwartz. I had $43,000 that I put into my savings account. I consider myself one of the luckier ones in the situation. I was offered $36,000 back. So I lost a total of $7,000 in the situation.
Hi, my name is Jamal. I have received a little over $6,000 back. I'm still owed $11,000. My wife has received $100 back of her $55,000.
Now, this was obviously surprising. People who had put their money in a savings account were told they don't actually have that amount. Instead, the bank told them, we're going to give you whatever we think you have. In some cases, it was pennies on the dollar, seemingly at random. And to explain this vicious game of financial Russian roulette, we're going to have to map out what's really going on here. All of the people you've been hearing from save their money in fintech companies like Yada, Juno, and others. Slick financial apps that are not banks, but took deposits while advertising FDIC insurance. They did this using a middleman called Synapse to connect them with a real bank called Evolve Bank and Trust, who was FDIC insured in the event of a bank failure. So FDIC insurance, which is an American program where banks are insured with up to $250,000 against bankruptcy failure, it doesn't apply here because a bank didn't fail. A middleman did. Theoretically, everyone's money should still be safely held at Evolve. But this is where our mystery begins because as the bankruptcy carried on, Evolve said they didn't have all the customers' money. There was a giant gap between what Synapse said they had versus what Evolve did. According to the Wall Street Journal, up to $96 million might be missing. Evolve Bank claims they're not the problem. They literally don't have customers' money because they were told to send it to other banks like AMG and Lineage. Why? The story goes that in late 2023, Synapse wanted to diversify banks instead of relying on just one. So they set up relationships with other banks like AMG and Lineage to hold customers' money and diversify. Makes sense. Now, most customers weren't aware of this change because it was only noted in an opt-out email basis sent to customers, meaning if you didn't see it when it came through, your money may have been moved without you ever knowing or approving it. Normally, this wouldn't matter, and some fintechs like Yada even pitched it as a way to get increased FDIC insurance coverage, which in hindsight is ironic. But the effect is that everyone's money was shuffled around like a game of 3-card Monte. Of course, Synapse, in theory, should have records of where all that money went, but Synapse is now in bankruptcy. And not everyone agrees with their numbers, specifically Evolve Bank and Trust, who says they don't have as much of the customer funds as Synapse says they do. To prove it, Evolve hired Incurra Consulting to do their own reconciliation of the bank's balance sheet, and their numbers versus Synapse's numbers is what has created the gap. These results were given to customers on November 4th, the day before the presidential election. Always a pretty good day to hide bad news. That is, you don't have as much savings as you thought you had. Customers are understandably confused and angry. Whoever's fault this is, it's not theirs. So that's what we're trying to uncover. Where is this nearly $100 million of missing funds? Somebody has it, but everyone's saying it's not them. The other banks, AMG and Lineage, by the way, do not deny they had some of the money from Evolve, but they tend to agree with Synapse's version of the ledger and have already paid out based on that. Meanwhile, Evolve is also saying they've paid out their fair share. So we're stuck in this horrible situation where people are using different ledgers to say, oh, we fully paid out everyone. And some people are getting pennies on the dollar, seemingly at random.
My name is Max, and I have a little bit over $21,000 in a Yota account.
How much is the bank gonna give you back?
Evolve is going to give me $17 back out of those $21,000.
How does that feel? I mean, what is that like?
A slap in the face. It's an insult. Honestly, I would have rather them not giving me anything and say that they cannot proceed with the complete reconciliation that they initially intended to do, than to give me scraps and then basically washing their hands with it.
My name is Pblar, and I put $20,000 into my Yata savings account. After the reconciliation, Evolve has told me that they're going to offer me $700 out of that $20,000.
Insulting. It's insulting.
So my name's Corey, and I had about $34,000, a little over $34,000 left in my account at the time of everything being frozen. Well, they are giving me back $0 out of the $34,000 that I am supposed to have.
Now, with so much on the line, all of these banks have been desperately trying to put out their side of the story, with specifically Evolve's being the most different. And they've been sharing screenshots of hundreds of millions of dollars moving from their bank to these other banks, saying that they just don't have the money. Whereas Synapse's CEO, on the other hand, has been very vocal as well. Even one of the fintechs, Yata, has sued Evolve. But at the end of the day, it's become a bit of a he said, she said, where everyone has their own numbers that they're using to say we're right, but it's hard to rely on anyone's word. So I wondered if we could trace the problem ourselves a little differently, not relying on any one source, but instead going to everyone, just asking questions and maybe finding some different threads to pull on that gives us insights. And this is where things got interesting. Little by little, I was able to get a bunch of internal emails and documents between these companies, even get detailed banking records. All of this showed big problems, but they had been brewing for much longer than I thought. Way before everything blew up in May of 2024, rewind the clocks back to when everyone's money was in one place at Evolve, and let's look at some internal documents that were sent to Synapse. It's September 25th, 2023. That's the day Evolve sent notice that Synapse had breached the Master Services Agreement by failing to fully fund the FBO account. By the way, FBO just means for benefit of. Plain English, it means it's the customer's account. The money people were putting into these fintechs wasn't fully funded by what was in the actual bank account per their agreement. That's what Evolve says. Evolve then demands $50 million in a reserve account to be filled within 2 days of the letter. They also notify Synapse that they're going to take $16 million from what is called the Synapse's fee account to hold it for end users, aka customers. Now understand, the fees, that just means the interest Synapse would have been paid on the cash they hold with Evolve. Synapse, of course, is a middleman, so a lot of that money they're going to make from interest is just passed on to fintechs like Yata, who then in turn passes it on to customers. So if Synapse is short $16 million, that means Yata and now a lot of people are short $16 million. Everyone's getting squeezed, but that's just the start of the problem. So you remember Synapse owes $50 million in the next 2 days. But when it comes due, Synapse gets a termination letter from Evolve, and then they send their own email. Now, before we open this, understand, customers had no idea that their money might not be fully funded at the bank and were never notified of these problems. Everything you're about to hear is being whispered in emails right now. And what is being said, like deliberate misstatements, factual realities, potential harm, these are white collar words for, hey, we think this is going to end in disaster and we think you did it. But of course, nobody knows that yet except for Synapse and Evolve. Synapse even seems to anticipate this would eventually go public because they write in their letter, we do not expect this response will prompt significant change, but we hope it will correct the record and provide factual transparency to those who may read your letters. Like us, for example. They're anticipating outside parties were going to come in and read all of these. Now, in here we find Synapse blaming the deficiency in the customer account on Evolve. They accuse Evolve of misappropriation of funds, a situation caused by Evolve itself. Synapse claims that 12 days prior, they had notified Evolve that Evolve was charging fees from customers' accounts that they shouldn't have. Basically, they were payment processor fees. The payment processor was called TabaPay, and this should not have been on the customer to pay it. According to Synapse, about $12 million in fees were charged to their customers. And Synapse says this $50 million demand you guys gave us, that's retaliation for us telling you that you have been misappropriating these funds. Synapse then also highlights a $13 million account analysis charge that was also improperly taken from customers' money. So both sides are basically demanding tens of millions from each other. And we'll get to some concrete evidence in a moment, but I want to flag that for right now, Evolve, Synapse, the chilling realization is that whoever's right, this collapse began over a year ago. And more importantly, before the migration of funds out of Evolve Bank. Banking experts who have been watching this unfold, by the way, have commented on this. Jason Mikula is our fintech and banking resident expert. He agreed to help me get to the bottom of this. And here's what he told me.
In my mind, one of the biggest worst decisions was allowing this brokerage migration to take place, which is on both Synapse and Evolve, right?
Yeah.
Allowing that migration to take place when it would seem that everyone knew the records were not accurate and reliable and that there was a shortfall. Because that has really compounded the difficulty of trying to unwind this situation and understand what happened.
Exactly. Why would you shuffle everyone's money around to different banks if you hadn't sorted out where everyone's money was in the first place? This is the first question I brought to Evolve, the question of the shortfall. Evolve's position appears to be, oh, there's no shortfall of funds at Evolve, but that can't be true based on their September 2023 correspondence. They're the ones who said you didn't fully fund the account. There had to be a shortfall. Now, how big exactly it was is a little trickier to figure out. Not that I haven't tried. Remember, I do have a bunch of internal banking records from thousands of customers, which, by the way, I can't believe they didn't make me sign an NDA for or redact in any way, which I thought was incredibly irresponsible. Either way, essentially, I looked through everybody's, bank records. It was monthly statements for Synapse's customers going back literally years at Evolve. And I used a couple of scripts to turn these PDFs into a database and queried it for certain fees. Now, I was able to reproduce some of Synapse's claims. It does appear true that Evolve seems to be charging a bunch of fees to customers' accounts that they really shouldn't have. And it does go back years. Let me repeat that because it's really important. Customers were being charged improper fees directly from their accounts that should not have been there. And to my understanding, those fees have never been repaid. Why didn't Synapse address this sooner? I don't know. It seems like they brought it up only in 2023 when this has been happening for several years. I can't figure that out. But Evolve's position seems to be much harder to explain. They say that some of these fees were owed by Synapse. That was part of their master agreement. But I got a copy of that agreement, and it seems like those fees were put in place later. It's very confusing. But the point is, did the customers ever get their money back? I asked Evolve about this in an email and was sent Evolve's lawsuit with Yada. In it, they kind of appeared to admit in the lawsuit that there were improper fees, but maybe it was an administrative mistake. And specifically that might be made up for by this reserve account, which they funded mostly using Synapse's money. Which I think is funny. Quote, Evolve transferring over $35 million from the reserve to customer accounts. Later, they state they had up to $43 million in a reserve account by the end of 2023. It's worth emphasizing that while Evolve says there was never a shortfall, and even if there was, they had it covered, the reason Synapse went bankrupt is kind of because of the shortfall. According to the Wall Street Journal, Synapse tried to sell itself and neared a deal with TabaPay. But TabaPay walked away over concern about the potential size of the shortfall, people familiar with the matter said. Now, yes, to those of you who have paid attention, TabaPay fees is part of the reason for all this disaster, and they also almost bought Synapse. Confusing, small world. The point is, how can Evolve say there's no shortfall, but everyone else seems to think that there is? Whether or not you believe this comes from improper fees that they took from customer accounts, I don't really care. The point is the chain of events here. Synapse notifies Evolve of missing funds. Evolve then says, okay, funds are deficient. Synapse, you owe $50 million to cover any possible liabilities. We're blaming it on you. And by the way, we're going to keep $16 million or so this month. Obviously, to make sure your customers get the money they're owed. Of course, this leaves Synapse and the fintechs that rely on it strapped for cash. Synapse reacts by moving a lot of their money outside of Evolve on an opt-out basis to other banks. But by this point, both parties, Evolve and Synapse, both know that there's a shortfall in the customer accounts. Both disagree about how big it is, who's responsible for filling the gap, but both of them still move the money, which makes no sense because suddenly the discovery of these mistakes is swept under the rug and all the money shuffled around. So was the money actually missing? Was it covered in the reserve account? We don't actually have a good way of knowing. But it gets even worse because one of the big events that actually led to this collapse was the Mercury migration. Mercury is yet another fintech company that confusingly markets itself as a sort of bank like Yada or Juno. On Google, it's described as Mercury Bank, and then directly underneath that, Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Clear as mud. Anyways, Mercury Bank, which is not a bank, worked with Synapse up until 2023, and they were by far the biggest client with over $3 billion in assets. But one day, they decide they don't really need Synapse. They want to work directly with Evolve. Now, that would be fine, but when you have a gap in customer funds, or might have a gap, it starts to get a little questionable because Mercury got paid out. They migrated. They got all $3 billion. Once again, Jason Mikula explains why this might be a problem.
But just because, somebody was using Yada and happened to have their Yada balance assigned to Evolve versus Mercury or Nomad or Yield Street or whatever, who, maybe wound down their program earlier, there is no justifiable reason why these Yada and Juno users should be the one, eating the losses just because they were sort of the last man standing, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I think the point is, once you realize there's a shortfall, people running for the door should start to be very heavily scrutinized because exactly the problem you said, which is that it just becomes sort of there's this moment at FTX where everyone realizes oh, they may not have all the money. Everyone runs for the door. Some people are just faster than others, right? And that seems to be a huge problem here where, and I don't want anyone, at the end of the day, no end user should have to bear the brunt of this. But if you're actually thinking about what it would look like for billions of dollars to take a loss on this, maybe you're looking at maybe 95 cents on the dollar, maybe 90 cents on the dollar per customer. Whereas now we're having a lot of people get made completely whole and some people basically getting zero. Or maybe 10 cents on the dollar. This is so unfair. And this even extends to Yada itself and customers themselves. They're getting these wildly different statements where some people go, I got all my money back. Why? I don't know. It's literally the funny thing is Yada began as a lottery. It is a lottery. But congratulations, you got what you paid for because we are literally rolling the dice with whether your money is there or not. And it has nothing to do with you or your decisions, the quality of your decisions. This is literally, we put our money in the same exact place. And for reasons that are completely unrelated to us, you get no money, I get all my money back. That makes no sense. I hope by now you're grasping how gross this whole situation is. Mercury Bank got 100% of their $3 billion or whatever back, while the much smaller fintech companies are eating up to a $96 million loss. We're not exactly sure how big the shortfall is, for absolutely no reason really, other than Mercury left Synapse before it blew up. I should note, Mercury would unequivocally deny that they moved for any improper reasons or that they were at all part of the cause of this collapse. But I do think we should be skeptical of the timing of all this, because in behind the scenes emails from Synapse to Evolve, we find out that Mercury decided to leave Synapse the same day that Evolve said there was a deficiency in the FBO account. So did Mercury find out that there were problems at Synapse before anyone else and run for the door? Or was this a very coincidental timing and they had planned it all along? I asked Mercury and they told me, quote, Mercury made the decision not to renew its contract with Synapse long before informing Synapse of the decision to terminate the relationship. Also telling me, quote, having direct relationships and integrations with our partner banks was in the best interest of Mercury and our customers. Clearly denying any coincidental timing. A month later, though, they also sent me another message saying Mercury has decided to end its relationship with Evolve Bank and Trust. Make of that what you will. I should also note, one of Evolve's executives left the company around the collapse, citing integrity as the reason for him leaving. Evolve Bank and Trust had no comment on this, understandably. Multiple other executives have also left the company. Now, I have extensively questioned Evolve for months about all of this, and I finally found one lead worth pursuing. Remember when Evolve noticed the shortfall? It withheld funds from Synapse. It put them in something called a reserve account. Well, throughout my conversations with Evolve, they referenced this account as if it still had money to pay people, saying that they had $43 million in reserve to pay out customers at the end of 2023. And along the way, I asked them, well, did you pay it out? You know, given that nearly $100 million may be missing, it would go a long way to fill that gap. And they told me, quote, we have provided updates regarding the reserve accounts in several of the bankruptcy hearing filings. Those hearings and filings are public. Evolve continues to hold reserve accounts on behalf of end users to be used as necessary, which is a very unhelpful way of answering a yes or no question. Did you hand out the money? Evolve instead points me to mountains of documents in a bankruptcy hearing. But funny enough, the person in charge of that bankruptcy seems confused also about Evolve's position. This is according to the bankruptcy trustee herself. Quote, Evolve has declined to report the potential use of reserve funds to pay end users. So that's an alarming statement coming from the person whose job it is to know where the money is in a bankruptcy. On Evolve's website, they say they hold $35 million in reserve funds it will distribute if the reconciliation indicates such distributions are appropriate. But whose reconciliation? That's the whole problem, isn't it? Is it Synapse's or the one Evolve hired out that says they don't owe any extra money, right? They've been using that to disagree with everybody. So what are we talking about here? According to them, they've paid out the money. There is no shortfall, meaning the $35 million is not owed to customers and instead goes where? Well, I asked them exactly that, and they responded, the funds will be handled in accordance with the relevant terms of the parties' master bank services agreement, which again is not helpful. And it concerns me that maybe Evolve is trying to find a way to hold on to this money for themselves, saying that they've paid out everybody and that this is just millions of dollars extra. If they didn't think they could do that as an option, they can and should just say so directly and publicly. They did not. I was also confused about exactly how much money they had. In emails to me, they mentioned $43 million at the end of 2023. According to their website, they have $35 million right now. What happened to the $8 million difference? I asked them about this, and once again, they refused to answer, citing, quote, ongoing legal processes that prevented them from discussing it. Look, I'll tell you where the money is as soon as all the lawsuits about missing money come to a close. To be clear, I think everyone in this story should be scrutinized, but Evolve is a regulated bank, and regulated banks, most of all, and people with money in their reserve accounts even more so, should be scrutinized the most, especially since Evolve is where the shortfall started in the first place. Remember, months before anyone knew about the missing funds, them and Synapse were disagreeing about it in internal emails. So while yes, I am in favor of a full reconciliation with all the data across all the banks, until we get that, we need to look at who still has money in this ecosystem
and who had the money when all these problems first started showing up. All the while holding in our mind that, like all complicated stories, this is not just going to be a matter of one bad guy. Evolve, you know? I do think Synapse rightfully deserves plenty of blame as well, as long as we remember that Synapse is not the name people trusted and that ultimately they're in bankruptcy and can't pay more than they have anyways. The reason ultimately people, customers, trusted these fintech companies is because they saw FDIC insured slapped on the label and reasonably assumed that the regulated banks would keep them safe. And they absolutely did not. Not to mention, we can't forget about the regulators either.
We are not going to get a believable, satisfying answer about what happened here absent some kind of litigation or congressional. Basically, people need to be under oath answering questions or producing documents in response to subpoenas before we are going to have a true idea of what happened here. Like, I would like to see, Evolve leadership, Scott, Sankeet, before a congressional investigatory committee where they are testifying under oath. And the Fed, actually, for what it's worth, because the Fed absolutely asleep at the wheel, not doing its job, supervising specifically Evolve. There are other regulators at play, but the Fed by far holds the most culpability here.
Yeah, that's true. Jason has a point here. As much as it's Evolve's job as a regulated bank to have the right controls in place, it's also the regulator's job to make sure all of this is happening. Now, recently, this was actually brought up and addressed directly by the Fed chairman.
In April 2024, Synapse Financial Technologies, a fintech company that provided banking as a service solutions, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Chair Powell, since the Federal Reserve Board is a supervisor of the Evolve Bank and Trust, could you provide any updates on what you're doing to ensure that my constituents receive their funds and the expected timeline for them to receive their funds?
So as their supervisor, as you point out, we've been pressing that bank to get money back to their customers, and we're actively engaged with the bank as they take steps to do so and return that money. We're deeply concerned about the complaints that we've heard and aware of concerns raised during the bankruptcy proceedings. And to the extent there are violations of law, we'll follow up on that.
Well, there you have it. The Fed is deeply concerned. Unfortunately, there's not much of substance beyond this concern. We know that Evolve does not agree they owe any more funds. So what exactly does Jerome mean when he says this?
We've been pressing that bank to get money back to their customers, and we're actively engaged with the bank as they take steps to do so and return that money.
Whose money are we talking about here? And whose reconciliation are we relying on? Are we talking about the $35 million Evolve holds in reserve to be used as necessary? Like, yeah, that'd be great, but we haven't seen it. So yes, I'm glad Jerome is concerned, deeply concerned. But concerns don't pay bills. If you really want to know how things are actually going in a way that isn't sugarcoated, just listen to the bankruptcy trustee who in her last meeting said to the victims, quote, "I hope you get some resolution. I'm increasingly pessimistic that resolution will happen here." And that is the cold truth. Look, I don't really know how to wrap this up. I'm going to be honest. There's so many people at fault here, so many ways you could slice the blame up, and I don't know how to close it in a way that's not depressing. Like, honestly, I considered scrapping this video many times because there's not a great resolution here. It's just you can explain that something very deep has gone wrong, but what else? I mean, I can't tell you that the funds are magically going to appear. At some point, though, I realized if I didn't report on it, it's kind of like erasing the experience of all these people who've slipped through the cracks of a regulatory system built to protect them and that didn't, and is now trying to forget that they exist. So I'm making this in the hopes of just bringing Evolve to the table to spend tens of millions of their reserve funds on the people who deserve it. I also hope it gets more regulatory attention and forces all the banks to the table to share their data and ultimately pay their fair share. But until then, I will be honest, it is a very grim picture. And I'm afraid the people who we've spoken to, there is a real chance that they won't get justice here. Until then, all we can do is tell their stories and honor them.
I was putting all this money into the savings account with the hopes of one day being able to purchase a house, and I was getting close to that goal up until everything was frozen.
I don't have a consistent paycheck that I can plan off of, so that's kind of my money to make sure that I make it through to when I can actually make money again. And so I don't lose my house, don't lose my car. You know, I can pay all my bills on time. It's very, very important for me to have that fund behind me.
Money's already tight in this day and age, so to not have access to that large of a sum of money is pretty depressing.
And initially when it hit, it was just like, oh, I'm out $20,000. But now that time has gone by, I realize that it's not just the money that's gone, it's the time that I put in to make that money. And it's just a waste of time at the end of the day, like multiple years of my life.
I've been in not great health for a couple of years now. I'm recovering from a surgery to remove kidney cancer. I've got chronic pain from 2 car accidents and a hip surgery, a thyroid condition, polyp in my gallbladder, etc., etc. This money, the $53,000, was part of a settlement from the car accident. I've been selling stock from my inheritance to pay bills rather than using this money, which was supposed to be for day-to-day expenses and a rent.
I consistently put the same amount every paycheck this whole time. And I never touched the money because that's what it was, like emergency fund. And funny enough, this year, everything happened. The house had issues, my mom got sick. I mean, the list goes on, and it's so funny how when you actually need the money, I don't have it. So yeah, that money meant a lot, and it's been difficult. It's been difficult for sure.
Hi, quick update. After recording and pressing Evolve for months, they finally provided a public update saying they found more money at their bank belonging to customers, and they sent it out. They declined to say how much was found or whether they used the reserve account to pay it, but from public reports, some are getting paid back fully, others a little bit, and others are still getting nothing. Evolve is now offering to help the financial costs of a full reconciliation across all banks, which is a credit to them, but it's unclear whether that's going to happen. It's all left me wondering how it's possible for banks to find customer funds they've had for almost a year but didn't know they had. Either way, I hope this gets resolved soon. I hope Evolve finds the rest soon, or somebody does, and they use that reserve fund to make people whole. These people have waited long enough. Thanks for watching. That's the last update I have.
The guy's good. He's very smart. Very smart. He manipulates and twists the truth just the way he wants to get his people to believe a certain thing, hiding behind the veil of, I don't make money off this platform. I'm doing God's work. I'm doing justice, by the way. Go join my Patreon. We're going to see the behind the scenes of my $10 million studio. $10 million studio. You got $10 million? Where did that money come from?
Well. Coffee soda. Looks like you don't have any more lifelines.
I wouldn't take a dirty deal.
Perhaps you should re-examine your past.
I think it's about time we tell the truth. It's in his descriptions on his Patreon, which I joined. He kicked me off though.